Vladimir Putin's invasion of Crimea ratcheted up tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Now the U.S. is authorizing sanctions against Russia. What's at stake? And is another Cold War in the offing? Congressman Chris Smith, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, joins us. And later, if you're raising girls, you won't want to miss this. Family advocate and author of the new book, Daughters in Danger, Elaine Bennett, joins us to offer cautions and advice for raising healthy, happy young women. And she'll take your calls and emails, so get them ready. Lots to get to tonight. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Congressman Chris Smith and Elaine Bennett are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's program, you can always send me a tweet at Raymond Arroyo. And if you're raising a daughter and facing a particular challenge, Elaine Bennett will answer your questions a little later in the program. Send us an email at worldover@EWTN.com or call in 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. or internationally 205-271-2980. Lots to bring you, so here's the brief. News from the world over this week. Pope Francis marked the beginning of Lent with Ash Wednesday services in Rome. The Holy Father led the traditional penitential procession to the Basilica of Saint Sabina, where ashes were then distributed. During his homily, the Pope warned the faithful of today's increasingly artificial world, obsessed with possessions, a place where God is excluded. Extemporizing and leaving the text, the Pope seemed to call out fellow prelates in the Roman Curia. He noted the power struggles he witnesses on a daily basis. These people play at being God the Creator, the Pope said. They still haven't understood that they aren't God. Lent, he urged, calls us to remember that we are creatures, not God. Next week, the Pope and top curial officials begin a 6-day Lenten retreat nearby Rome. It's the first time the retreat has been held outside the Vatican. The Pope has decided it will be a full, silent retreat, and all church business will be put on hold for the participants. And another papal interview is stirring controversy. I've gotten lots of emails about this one, and my Facebook page exploded over it. Media outlets around the world are reporting that Pope Francis suggested that the church could be open to gay civil unions. In a wide-ranging interview with the Italian daily Corriere della Sera, the Pope was asked about civil unions and whether it was, quote, a path that the church can understand. But up to what point? Here is Pope Francis's actual response in full. The translation was provided by Zenit News. Marriage, the Pope said, is between one man and one woman. The secular states want to justify civil unions to regulate different situations of coexistence, spurred by the need to regulate economic aspects between persons, as, for instance, to ensure health care. Each case must be looked at and evaluated in its diversity, end quote. Banner headlines reported that statement to mean that the Pope would consider at some level same-sex unions. That is not really what he said. Vatican press office consultant Father Thomas Rosica later attempted to clarify the remarks. He insisted that the Pope spoke about the obligation of the state to fulfill its responsibilities towards citizens and, quote, did not choose to enter into debates about the delicate matter of gay civil unions. As the first anniversary of Pope Francis's pontificate approaches next week, a new poll suggests that his popularity and the widely perceived Francis effect is having little effect, if any, among the American faithful. According to the latest Pew Research Center survey, there has been virtually no change in the percentage of Americans who identify as Catholic. No change in mass attendance, confession, or charity work. Perhaps more concerning, compared to a year ago, the survey shows that more Catholics expect the Church will one day allow priests to marry, permit women's ordination, and embrace birth control. 36% of those surveys said they believe same-sex marriage will also be recognized. As for a silver lining in the survey, Catholics, both church-going and non-observant, said they were more excited about the Catholic faith, pray more, and read the Bible or other religious texts more frequently. Meanwhile, the breakup of Ukraine could soon be on the horizon. On Thursday, lawmakers in the Russian-occupied Crimea unanimously voted to put forth a ballot initiative to join Russia. In what amounted to a declaration of independence from Ukraine, the Crimea Parliament will let its citizens decide on March 16th whether they want to join their neighbor to the east. 60% of Crimea's citizens are ethnic Russian. Speaking from the White House hours later, President Barack Obama rejected the referendum as a violation of Ukraine's constitution and international law. The U.S. and European Union have implemented minor economic and diplomatic sanctions against Moscow. Lawmakers in Russia have already pushed a bill to facilitate a handover. More on this in our next segment. Here in Washington on Tuesday, President Obama sent lawmakers a new $3.9 trillion budget for 2015. The proposal includes $1 trillion in new taxes, mostly on the rich and corporations, plus a slew of new spending to include climate change research and improved technology in schools. When announcing his budget proposal, the president said it reflects a choice for Americans, whether to protect tax breaks for wealthy Americans or grow the economy. Despite the tax increase, the budget does little to reduce the federal government's perennial deficit of more than $500 billion annually. House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan called the proposal disappointing, claiming it will do nothing to preserve or strengthen unsustainable entitlement programs. And America's first televangelist is a step closer to sainthood. Medical experts for the Congregation for the Causes of the Saints unanimously recognized a miracle attributed to the intercession of Venerable Fulton Sheen. In a statement, the Diocese of Peoria said the purported miracle involved an Illinois stillborn in 2010. For over an hour, the child showed no signs of life as doctors attempted to revive him. The child's parents and loved ones began immediately to seek the intercession of Fulton Sheen. Today, the toddler, named James Fulton, is healthy and developing normally. Archbishop Sheen, best known for his Emmy-winning program Life is Worth Living, can still be seen on EWTN. The congregation's theologians will review the case next. And finally, in the spirit of Lenten repentance, Pope Francis offered a confession of his own on Thursday, a surprising one. During an informal chat with Roman priests about the need to be merciful, he revealed that he had once stolen from another priest. The Pope spoke of a great confessor in Buenos Aires who had heard his confessions and those of many others, including Pope John Paul II. When the priest died, Francis went to pray by his open casket. He was stunned that no one had brought the priest any flowers, so he came back with a bouquet. And as he arranged them, he noticed the rosary still held in the dead priest's hand. Immediately there came to mind the thief we all have inside ourselves, the Pope said. So, with just a bit of force, I pulled the cross off the rosary. In that moment, he said he looked down at his beloved confessor and said, "Give me half your mercy." To this day, Pope Francis wears the cross in a pouch over his heart under his cassock. When we return, President Barack Obama has issued sanctions against Russia for its actions in Ukraine. Will they have much effect? And is this the opening of another Cold War? We'll examine it with Congressman Chris Smith when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Following Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Crimea, purportedly to quell the civil unrest in Ukraine, the United States issued sanctions against Russia. President Obama warned local Crimean officials about breaking away from Ukraine, claiming it would violate international law. Now, American fighters and a destroyer are moving into the region. What happens next, and what's at stake? For all of that, we're joined by New Jersey Congressman and member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chris Smith.
Raymond, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming back on the show. Putin, really, this seems to be part of some long-term strategy. We saw Putin earlier expand the borders of Georgia. Now, this incursion into Crimea. Tell us what he is doing and what's at stake here.
Well, there's no doubt he's creating buffer zones. He is actually expanding the boundaries, if you will, of Russia. I was actually in Tbilisi, Georgia, about 7 days after they invaded Abkhazia and South Ossetia, where there were at least a large number of Russian people, or Russian origin. And there was an attempt to say, we own it. There was a brief firefight with the Georgians. They fled, and they've owned it ever since by way of aggression. Fast forward to right now, the Crimea, which has overwhelmingly Russian origin people, are now in a very, very similar situation where they've moved in. They made it a fait accompli almost overnight. The fact that our intelligence didn't anticipate this, the fact that the President of the United States did not anticipate this is very beguiling, and it begs the question about why not? Why weren't we on the phone sooner, working this
Was it an intelligence failure? There's some saying the intelligence was misread, that it was there, but there are conflicting reports on the way in which it was interpreted. Do you think that's what happened?
I don't know yet, and I don't want to say, or even speculate. It's just that the bottom line is that they moved in quickly, while everyone else was looking on.
Everybody else was watching the Olympics when they were moving in, apparently.
As was Putin.
Yeah. In 2009, there was this missile defense system that the United States, back in the Bush administration, had committed to our allies in Poland and the Czech Republic. When President Obama came along in 2009, he simply canceled that deal, purportedly, and from what we're told, to appease the Russians. Why lower all the defenses? Now our allies are naturally shell-shocked, and we were sending the F-15s in.
Well, President Obama, and really the left in general, have always been very disparaging about missile defense systems. I remember when Senator Kennedy named our efforts to stop a ballistic missile from making its way to the United States as Star Wars and a non-nuclear defense system that says we're going to frustrate your ability to drop a payload, a nuclear weapon, or chemical weapon for that matter, or any other kind of weapon of mass destruction on the United States or any of our allies. So fast forward again to Poland, the president comes in and somehow suggests that President George W. Bush had it all wrong. We needed a reset with Russia, and that's something that Hillary Clinton talked about over and over again, and that was such a misguided and they underappreciated, frankly, the nature of Moscow and the Kremlin and Putin himself. And so they played, in my opinion, largely into his hands. Rather than a peace through strength, look them in the eye, and if you make a concession, like dismantling or never erecting a missile defense system for Poland, which wanted it desperately. They have suffered over the centuries so disproportionately to other countries, Ukraine and close right there alongside with them. They wanted that defense as a hedge, and unfortunately the president gave it up with no concession from Moscow's side.
Well, it seems now President Obama is thoroughly convinced that something is afoot. It seems to me Putin is expanding or trying to reunite the entire Soviet bloc and reclaim it. Here is what President Obama is saying now. Listen.
I signed an executive order that authorizes sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine or for stealing the assets of the Ukrainian people. According to my guidance, the State Department has also put in place restrictions on the travel of certain individuals and officials. These decisions continue our efforts to impose a cost on Russia. and those responsible for the situation in Crimea.
Is that cost high enough? Denying visas to people who are not named. They refuse to name targets, according to Secretary of State Kerry. Right. And at the same time, you have assets being frozen for people we fail to identify as well.
Well, there is an identification that the administration does, but it just hasn't been made public. But it is a very modest, almost slap on the wrist type of response.
Well, Kerry said it does not include Putin or the Russian top officials. So what pain is being extracted?
I know. In 2004, in response to a dictatorship in Belarus, which remains in close union with Putin, I authored a bill called the Belarus Democracy Act, and we, in that act, make it very difficult for named individuals, including the dictator there, Lukashenko, to travel. His assets are frozen. His ability to do commerce with Europe or the United States, because they have now followed our suit. But again, that's a modest, and I think it's a very calibrated response to Belarus. Here we have an aggression done in the plain light of day into the Crimea, and we slap on some sanctions. I think it has to be much more robust than that, and unfortunately, so far, they look at this, in my opinion, and say that doesn't really hurt.
And the EU is still deliberating.
Yeah, they sure are. And you know, there's been. You know, we do have to move, and here we are, I think, as a country moving in the right direction to try to shore up and fortify through loan guarantees and other kinds of assistance.
Which
to
Congress
the Ukrainians
passed today, $1 billion package.
$1 billion package, exactly today.
But is this enough? And here's the other question. I've been getting a lot of emails to this effect.
Sure.
Should we even be concerned and meddling in that end of the world? Isn't this Europe's problem? Shouldn't the EU be fully engaged? Why is the United States even a player in this? And isn't this creating a new Cold War scenario? Well,
we are very closely linked to Europe. And frankly, if this were to degenerate into a larger conflict, or even a larger conflict in Ukraine itself, the implications for regional and even global peace are huge. We are joined at the hip with our European allies, with NATO. If any of those countries are attacked, it's as if we were attacked. So we do have an alliance that, at its best, deters aggression. But when when we're not serious, or we have a sense of indifference, I mean, for instance, the cuts that President Obama has suggested to our defense structure, including our end strength, the number of men and women who can be deployed, send precisely the wrong message to every dictatorship around the world, including China, including Iran, and including the ruling clique in Moscow, including Putin.
Tell me about Victoria Nuland. Now, she is the #2 at the State Department.
Assistant Secretary.
And apparently her phone conversations were intercepted, and this was broadcast by Russian media. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, they released it to the world, frankly, and we believe it was the Russians who interdicted her phone conversation with the U.S. ambassador to the Ukraine. And in it, she said, and I'm going to use the word, but she said, F the EU, showed a great deal of impatience for what the European Union was doing, and that caused our allies in Germany and elsewhere to really feel violated. That what is the United States doing? Why aren't we on the same page, working at a coordinated strategy? And again, that's where this sense of indifference comes in on every crisis around the world. China is claiming the East China Sea and as territorial waters. Our response has been feckless, to use a word that's getting more use in the last week, and very, very weak and vacillating. In South Sudan, I had a hearing on South Sudan just last week. Salva Kiir, who George W. Bush was very close to, he's the new president of the newest country in the world. Well, they have a conflict going on there. Thousands of people have been killed, tens of thousands displaced. Not even a phone call from President Obama. So I asked our ambassador, special envoy, Ambassador Booth, why not? And he said, well, we don't know what the right time is. Pick up the phone, Mr. President, and call him. He still wears a hat that was given to him by President Bush. We have influence there, and we need to do more. Same goes for Iran, and we know what's happening in Syria, on again, off again. Where's our focus? And there's just too little, too late, and we never seem to be proactive one step ahead of the game. It's always a reactive foreign policy.
I want to play this bite for you. This is Speaker of the House John Boehner offering his reflections on what the president should be doing vis-a-vis Ukraine. Listen.
If it's truly a national emergency, then the president should order the Secretary of Energy to expedite the approval of American natural gas exports. Russia has an energy stranglehold on much of Europe and has been using it to its own advantage. And there's a growing consensus that ending this de facto export ban would not only keep Putin in check, but help our economy as well and help our allies in Europe.
What would be the opposition to doing something like that?
Well, it's interesting. In the Foreign Affairs Committee today, we had a resolution, and one of the amendments to it was to, very robustly look to export natural gas and energy to the Ukraine. And there were some people who were very hesitant about that. We ended up with a compromised bit of language, but I think it's an outstanding idea. One of the chief problems now, we're in the middle, coming out of winter, of course, in Ukraine, is that if the gas is turned off, and that has happened in the past, or at least limited.
Where Russia cuts it off.
Where Russia
they
cuts
are the primary provider.
It has a catastrophic impact, not just on Ukraine, but in many parts of Europe. So energy independence, the Keystone Pipeline, which has been vigorously opposed by President Obama for years, would make us more independent of Middle East oil and gas, especially oil, but also would help our allies, including Ukraine, to have another dependable source of energy, so the ability of Putin to put a tourniquet on that gas, it becomes less likely.
Tell me about the Christian communities in Ukraine. From what I'm reading, I've been talking to a number of priests, or conversing rather with a number of priests in the region, some bishops. They are unified behind support for the existing Ukrainian government. They are opposed to this union with Russia.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
What do they face as a community, given what we've seen in other parts of the world, in Iraq, in Korea, in other places?
Well, the Christians have played, and the Catholics, the Orthodox have played a huge positive role, including when the people were massing on the Independence Square. I met with the Patriarch just a few weeks ago, while it was still very much, the crowds were everywhere. And they told me how not only were they out there standing between those with the guns, the secret police, the bullies, and the people, trying to act as a buffer between the two, standing there with the cross, with icons, to say, this isn't the way. They also told me how when people were wounded, very often the police would follow them to the hospital and then arrest them there, and then they would, quote, disappear. So they were taking many of these individuals into monasteries and other places for shelter, as well as medical services, and refusing access so that they couldn't be kidnapped, and where they might be tortured or killed.
But now Crimea essentially is an occupied state. I mean, the Russians have control of it militarily. If this referendum goes forward on March 16th, 60% of the population is already Russian by blood. Right. It is not unforeseeable that they would approve this reunification with Russia. What does the United States do then? What do you do as a representative?
Well, again, there's a little bit of a deja vu here with Georgia. The Russians still own Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which they took by force. Yeah. And now we have a very similar situation where Crimea, where they already had pre-existing forces, and of course their Black Sea Navy, they have just expanded the number of troops and presence. And it's a de facto situation that the international community failed to anticipate. And again, I think that's because of 5 years, and I mean this sincerely, of indifference on foreign policy and this would include places like Iran, where there was this Pollyannish view that we could just reach out to Tehran with an open hand, and somehow that would deter them from developing or seeking to acquire the capability of a nuclear bomb. And you got to recognize authoritarian and dictatorships for what they are, and have deterrent strategies and be 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of them, and we were not in the Crimea, nor were we in Ukraine.
Very quickly before we go, Syria, we keep reading reports of Christians now paying fees to the so-called rebels, the largely Muslim rebels, to stay alive and remain in the region. If they don't pay this tax, they're out. This sounds like something that happened during the Crusades. These are the people, incidentally, that the United States is arming and funding to some extent. Your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that, again, and I had a hearing on this, that I've met with many Christians who have escaped or are part of the diaspora speaking out on behalf of Syrian Christians. It is a genocide. People are being killed. Men and women and children are being killed in Syria simply and only because they happen to be Christian. And you know, Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda-like organizations have increased, not decreased, their presence. And again, where's the president? When has he spoken last on Syria to try to forge an end to this terrible bloodletting that's occurring there?
It is perplexing. We will continue to watch this. Before we go, I have to show this to people.
Can I just say,
go ahead, real fast.
Archbishop Chula, I had a hearing on the persecuted Christians around the world. And the Holy See's ambassador, Archbishop Chulakot, gave, as did our other witnesses, but he gave unbelievably effective and comprehensive testimony about how the most persecuted group of people in the world for their faith are Christians. And he was in Baghdad as a bishop for some 5 years. And as he said, things are worse now than they were under Saddam Hussein.
It's staggering.
It's mind-boggling.
This is a new, I want to show people this. You, of course, know this. This is now going to be hung in the Veterans Affairs Chambers. A certain former chairman was given this honor, and this is an honor often given to the last chairman, a painting of Chris Smith. So I wanted to share that with the audience before we go. Great to see you, and
Raymond,
we will be in
thank you
touch.
for
Thank you. When we return, Elaine Bennett tells us what dangers our daughters could be in and how you might rescue them. She's the author of Daughters in Danger, and she'll take your questions, particularly those of you facing a difficult situation with your daughter. You can reach us at Raymond on Twitter or via phone. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there. Thanks again.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. She is the founder and president of the Best Friends Foundation, a school-based character education program that has touched the lives of over 30,000 girls in 15 cities. Tonight, she's here to give us a warning about our daughters and the unique perils they face in today's hyper-sexualized culture. She's the author of the new book, Daughters in Danger, helping our girls thrive in today's culture. We're very pleased to be joined by Elaine Bennett.
Thank you, Raymond.
Great to see you. And the book is riveting, it's frightening, and fascinating. Let's start with what dangers and why are our daughters facing more dangers today, do you think?
Well, you touched on it. Our culture today is more vulgar, it's more violent, and it's more sexualized than ever before. And I think, tragically, 40% of teenage girls know someone who has been hit or beaten in their intimate relationships. We know that domestic violence has increased in the last few years. The White House just had a council on women and girls in which they discussed the fact that sexual violence and domestic violence is on the upswing. College campuses, 1 out of 5 girls have been sexually assaulted on our college campuses.
Wow. And let's back up a bit and explain what factors you think are contributing to this. I mean, when I read your book, 9.4% of high school students have experienced dating violence, 22% of girls. What are the consequences of this kind of violence?
Well, the consequences are very sad for the girls.
Right.
Think of what that does to their self-worth and their emotional well-being. Any time a young girl or a young guy is in a relationship in which there's fear, it's time to get out. And we need to encourage our young people to know there are answers, there are places to go, there are adults who will help them. And colleges are moving. They're moving slowly, but they are moving to take stands on some of these serious issues. I really like what Princeton has done with the Dean No Contact Order.
What does that mean?
That means that if someone is feeling harassed, a girl ordinarily, or it could be a guy, by another student, that student does not have to take legal action. He or she can simply request a Dean No Contact Order, in which the harasser must stay away and must not contact that student. Or risk expulsion.
Aha. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about that, the dangers and the danger hot spots in the college scene. Things have changed an awful lot in just the last decade.
Right. Well, the hookup culture, we know, is a major part of the danger. It's prevalent now on campuses. We know that, again, the hookup culture, for some reason, seems to have led to more dangerous situations for girls. Binge drinking? Binge drinking is on the upswing. Girls now, or particularly girls, for some, they've tracked girls in co-ed dorms, are 2 times more likely to binge drink than they did, say, 8 to 10 years ago.
Wow.
So the girls are getting the message, I think, that they can party at the same level of the guys and that they won't suffer.
Well, the girls are getting the message that they can be frat boys.
Yeah, exactly.
There's this kind of odd predatory behavior, carefree sort of madness out there. Tell us how much of this is coming from the pop culture.
Oh, a lot.
To what degree?
A great amount. The social network has contributed to this feeling that you can go on and chat with, you think you're chatting with 2 or 3 people and you're chatting with 200 or 300 people. The anonymity.
The sexting.
The sexting has gotten to be a big deal. And that's starting as young as 6th, 7th, 8th grades with the availability of the smartphones. 85% of middle schoolers have smartphones. And guess what that opens them up to?
Yep, and you're seeing the sad results on these campuses and in the lives of the people you deal with all the time. Let's talk about pornography. We have seen an explosion of pornography. The effect that this has, not only on boys, but on the women and the young girls that they meet. Tell me about that and how you've found, the things you've found anecdotally through your work.
Well, Judith Reisman is the authority on this, and I have great regard and great respect for her. She has worked diligently in this field to try to make people aware of what the damage to a young man's psyche of early reading of pornography. And apparently, it's even far more available now, of course,
because of the smartphones and the computers,
Exactly, and often parents have no idea what their sons, as young as 9, 10, and 11, can be exposed to. The pop-ups, as we know, and they really do need to take some action in putting controls on the internet.
And there is female pornography as well. I mean, I read chunks of 50 Shades of Grey, but when this thing was exploding, it's in the grocery aisle. You see ladies and young girls reading it on beaches.
It's beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically about a sadistic relationship with an
feminists
overlay
on
of
this
romance.
One?
Yeah, I mean,
Maureen Dowd wrote about this and said, after all these years, why would women in droves want to read a book that's about female submission?
Yeah,
and
I mean,
in the sickest way.
Yeah, submission is the light word for it. I mean, this is humiliation, degradation.
Humiliation, degradation, depravity.
Yeah.
I think I would caution any parent today not to have this book in their house, not to have it available for their adolescent daughters.
What does it teach?
Or their sons.
Is it teaching girls to believe that this is normal behavior, that you can be subjected to all kind of sadomasochistic, what I find, depravity is a good word, in the name of affection and intimacy? Is it teaching them that that's okay?
I don't know what it's teaching. I don't think it's teaching anything. I think it's about shock. I think it's about titillation, just getting people to read a book and then buy another book. And I think there are 3 books now, and now they plan to make a movie. I do think the fallout from this could be really dangerous to our young girls.
Tell me about the Best Friends Foundation, an incredible organization that goes into schools, public schools, and teaches character formation, encouraging abstinence to wait to have sex once a marriage is
That's right. We tell our girls to make the decision, and this is in the 6th grade, to say no to sex, drugs, alcohol, and violence. And we started in 6th grade. We have a weekly program through 8th grade. And then once our young girls go on to high school, we have a Saturday program called the Diamond Girl Program. And in 2000, we began a program for boys because the principals were so happy with how the girls' behavior improved. They were happy with the fact that academic achievement went up. These are all side issues to our main issue of preventing misbehavior.
But it's peer-to-peer, right?
Exactly.
How does that work?
Well, it's forming a peer group, a positive peer group, which I would absolutely encourage parents to be very aware of who their daughters' friends are and have their friends into the home, because a peer group, particularly in adolescence, starting at 13, 14, 15, is a primary factor in that child's engagement in risk behavior. If the peer group isn't engaging, your child will not be. If the peer group is, there's a heavy, heavy chance
to pull that child in.
Even though parents certainly are the primary influencers, peer group stacks right behind. And now, with the greater amount of time spent in entertainment media and on social networking versus within the family and in family discussions and quality family time, peer groups are becoming more and more dominant.
If you have a question for Elaine Bennett, if you're having a challenge with your own daughter, the number is on the screen, 1-800-221-9460. You can find us at worldover@EWTN.com, or you can tweet me at Raymond Arroyo. What is the secret, Elaine Bennett, to your success? When you started, a lot of these principals said, hold on, you got this nicely dressed McLean, Virginia living, nice lady, Maryland living, nice middle-class lady coming into our public school. How can she possibly connect with these inner-city kids on any level?
It's interesting you should ask that. Way back, 20-some-odd years ago, someone said, stay in your own zip code.
Oh.
These children are not going to listen to you. Why they won't identify with you. But a wonderful woman, Pauline Hamlin, who was the principal of Amadon, I think she's been on your program, stood up at a meeting and said, I want Elaine Bennett in my school next year with this program, because I had done some tutoring at Amadon. And she said, you know, children really don't look at what color you are. They look to see and they sense whether or not you care about them. And thankfully, the students sensed that this was something that would bring them in touch with adults with whom they could respect and they could learn from. And I have this undying faith in our young people, because I do believe hope springs eternal. And many of the children in this program are from single-parent families, wonderful mothers, many of them, some whose mothers were not in the home, but they saw an opportunity to be a part of a group in which they were a valued member. And I think they also saw an opportunity to feel more connected to their school and to have fun. As one little girl said, best friends brings my joy up. And that's a phrase that I will treasure forever, because that's what it's about. We want children to enjoy their childhood. That's why we brought in wonderful dance instructors, and we had aerobics, and we had music that was inspirational music. And for our boys, we had step drill teams and athletic activities and things that we knew would bring them joy.
We're going to talk in a moment about why you felt called to this particular work, and what tips you might offer the audience. I know we're getting lots of emails and calls, so we're going to take a quick break. We will continue with Elaine Bennett. She'll answer your questions. Keep those emails and calls coming. worldover@EWTN.com. Raymond Arroyo on Twitter. We'll be right back in a moment.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. On set, I'm joined by Elaine Bennett, the president of the Best Friends Foundation and author of this new incredible book, Daughters in Danger, Helping Our Girls Thrive in Today's Culture. In a moment, we'll get to your questions. Just hold tight for me. How did you get involved in this, Elaine? Was there a pivotal event that sort of drew you to this work?
I think I had a reality check when I was at Georgetown University Child Development Center, and I was working on issues in daycare. And a young girl came in with her baby to be evaluated, and she was 12 years old. And that made me wonder, how in the world can this child, who needed a childhood of her own, raise a child? And I started thinking about that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there were programs at Georgetown for girls from upper socioeconomic brackets, who were suffering from anxiety, from, in some cases, eating disorders. And often when I would hear the discussions from some of the therapists that many of the girls felt as if they'd been used by boys. They'd become sexually active too young. They did not get pregnant because that didn't necessarily happen within that group. But it seemed to me that someone needed to talk to adolescent girls about the kind of behavior they should be engaging in now. A lot of talk was about contraception at that point. Plumbing, exactly. And not so much about self-respect. How do you get self-respect, self-control? The fact that sexual activity is really adult activity. It's really not for children. It's not healthy for children.
Destructive for them, yeah.
And it's not only destructive physically, because the STD epidemic was just beginning. This was in the late 80s, beginning to rear its ugly head, and now we used to have 2 to worry about. Now we have 25 sexually transmitted diseases. But more important, really, although that's very important, than the physical health is the emotional health. And so in thinking about this, talking this over, I talked it over with my husband, I realized—
Bill Bennett?
Yes, my husband, Bill Bennett, that perhaps girls could benefit from a program that engaged them as a group, where girls supported each other in saying no to risk behavior and saying, we're going to wait to have sex.
This book, not only does it point out the current landscape and how laden with pitfalls it is for young girls, there are also practical solutions throughout. I want to get to a few of those. We're going to go to the phones. This is Dan from Connecticut. What's your question?
This is Mary from Illinois.
Okay, Mary.
Hi.
They wrote Dan in the prompter, but you can talk now, Mary.
All right. My granddaughter just told me that she was date raped at college, and I just want to know how to help her.
What should this mother do?
I think she was a grandmother, right, for her granddaughter. Well, first of all, it's great that she shared this with you. I mean, she cares, and she knows that her grandmother cares for her, and that's the first step. I think the second step would be to contact the dean at the college, because this is a very serious behavior. I mean, this is very serious. I assume these were other college students who engaged in this. Love her, tell her it was not her fault, that she cannot be blamed for this, that she will overcome this, that with a lot of love, that there are decent men out there, that for whatever reason, and I have a feeling alcohol was probably at the base of this, or drugs of some sort, of this, I guess it was a single man, young man. But I would encourage her to seek out the services at the university. Many, many colleges and universities have opportunities and have programs for girls in that, and they will keep them private.
Elaine,
she doesn't have to go public with it if she doesn't want to.
What role does faith play in all of this? Passing the faith on to a young girl, raising her in the faith community of whether it be Catholic or otherwise for the family.
Faith is one of the primary components in a healthy family, keeping the family together, keeping the family intact, bonding with your daughter, teaching your daughter reliable standards of right and wrong. The golden rule, teaching her young, when she's very young, to have compassion for others. And I have great compassion for this girl who just has shared her trauma. I would encourage her to seek out a faith-based organization to share this with. If she has a pastor or a priest she can talk to, because she will need a lot of help and a lot of love.
Love and attention through this period, yeah. That's exactly. It's a hard violation and wound. Dan from Connecticut, you have a question.
Yes, I do, for Elaine. I'm just amazed at the amount of so-called disguised pornography and violence that we're seeing on network cable TV, the movies, and even the popular music. As a former public school educator and grandfather, I'm at a loss, other than saying we haven't heard a public outcry about this. What can you suggest? And with that, thank you.
I'm surprised at this as well. I have followed Rihanna's story. Rihanna, who was physically abused, beaten up by Chris Brown, and Chris Brown actually went to jail for a brief period. Now he's back, and he's a big draw, and people are saying what a great dancer he is and a great singer, and participating in his comeback.
Young girls
Rihanna's
lining up
participating in his comeback. In fact, making a song with him, which I find it just very hard to believe. I actually support Tina Turner when she spoke up and said, look,
threw a shoe at Ike.
Yeah, this is what Ike did to me, and I'm getting out and getting away. And and that was much tougher for her because he was her manager.
Right.
Rihanna makes a song with Eminem called Love the Way You Lie, which is about abuse. And at the end of the song, the girl returns to the guy, and he apparently ties her to the bed and burns the bed down. I don't know why there is not the outcry about violence, about the violence in music. We did have the Parent Music Resource Center back in the 90s that tried really hard to get the ratings on CDs and on the music, so parents would be aware of what these lyrics are. As far as violence in the movies and there doesn't seem to be any holes barred.
I'm going to play a little clip. This is Miley Cyrus talking about taking her current show. Now, her new album is called Bangers, which I won't explain. But she's traveling the country, and as she goes to little towns, this is how she explains herself. Listen to this.
Even though parents probably won't think this, I think my show is educational for kids because of the art that they're going to be exposed to that most people don't know about. People are taught to look at things so black and white, especially in like small towns. So I'm more excited to take this show to places where stuff like this probably would never get accepted and kids wouldn't learn about this different kind of art.
It's education for kids, Elaine Bennett.
Well, she's just flat wrong. It's not education for kids, and it's not art.
Yeah.
It's graphic sex. I really liked Miley Cyrus when she was Hannah Montana.
In her Hannah Montana days,
I thought she had a great little, great program that girls would rush home after school to watch, and had some good values there. Sadly, she's, I think, gotten off track in a major way, and I don't quite understand. I know she doesn't have many friends. She's actually said that. She said, I don't think I have any true friends.
It's amazing when you peel back some of these performers, the wounds and the loneliness becomes so apparent. And of course, that bleeds out through their performances and through their art. Exactly. And in some ways, she's right. It is educational for children. It's just the wrong sort of educational. It's teaching them something, but it's nothing you'd want to pass on to your own children. Sylvia from Texas, very quickly, your question.
Yes, My
Go ahead,
question
Sue.
is basically how to handle when I teach catechism to 9 and 10-year-old girls, and they go to public school, and I've had responses when I ask them, what would make you happy, or what do you want to become? And they usually respond by saying, I would like to be sexy.
What would you say to them, Elaine?
I would say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by being sexy? Sometimes girls think that sexy and pretty are synonymous.
Right.
And they've been given the wrong message. They hear the word sexy so much. They aren't really sure what sexy means. If it means they want to be desirable and by guys, then we have to wonder where are they getting that message?
Yeah.
I would say, well, tell me what you mean by that word. And hear what they say.
Yeah, and use it as an opportunity to
exactly,
sort of
and then
guide them down
expand the
another
conversation.
path.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. You can find out more information about Elaine Bennett's incredible work with the Best Friends Foundation by visiting bestfriendsfoundation.org. And her book, Daughters in Danger, Helping Our Girls Thrive in Today's Culture, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. I encourage you to get it. Elaine Bennett, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thanks so much. Well, that is all the time we have until next week. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are on my website, and I'll bring you the latest news and commentary throughout the week, and I post the entire show there so you can watch us online. And if you sign up for my free e-blast, I'll send you exclusive content and the latest news. Go to the center of the website, RaymondArroyo.com. You can also catch the show 24/7 on EWTN's YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll commemorate Pope Francis's first year in the chair of St. Peter with conclave crew members Robert Royal and Father Jerry Murray. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye.